Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to do the 2020 mid-year check-in / freak-out book tag. This is a tag that I can take no credit for, really. I have a lot of attributions to leave down below, but it basically takes the questions from the perennially famous freak-out tag, and it adds in a few that I've found throughout the past couple of years from tags that other people have done. That haven't been as famous, I guess, but I'm keeping them alive in case people want to make more videos and ask themselves more questions. You can find them down below. I've had so much fun watching videos, so many videos of so many booktubers doing the freak-out tag, and for the past couple weeks, really, I've been scripting out answers to my own tag and adding in more and more books, so I should stop now before this video gets even longer than it probably will. I should also mention that my cat Missy might also perhaps get a little bit jazzed up and join us. Right now she's further down the bed, having a little fun with some of the books I have there. I like mentioning Missy in this tag as well because this is around the time of our anniversary when I got her from the Humane Society, and so for 2020 we've been together for 2 years. But anyway, on to what we're here for, which is to talk about books in a fun tag. So question number 1 is, how many books have you read thus far in 2020? And I am currently about to start number 50 as I sit down to film this, which of course means the answer is that I've read 49 books. Question number 2 is to talk about the best book you've read in 2020 so far, and quite surprisingly, it's nonfiction. The book is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, which is memoir, part, I guess, other things about Lori Gottlieb, who is a therapist, and she talks about therapy by way of creating some composites of patients she had in the past, and she also chronicles her own foray into being a patient when she had a depressing breakup and went to go seek help of her own, and what all of these experiences teach her about the human experience. And I just absolutely loved it. I just feel like, I mean, as a fiction writer and a fiction reader, I love this because this teaches us about the nuance and complexity of human beings and how multidimensional we are, and how there's something compelling about anyone and something compelling in all of their stories, and in how we try to strive for what's best in our lives and our relationships, and ways that therapy can help us get through some of the detritus. And I also feel like this book portrays therapy in a way that people who are skeptics even, I think, seem to appreciate what she's doing here and understand that therapy isn't just a bunch of hooey, it's actually something legitimate in terms of assessing mental health and assessing who and where we are. I was probably going to read it anyway, but I ostensibly read it for the BookTube Prize quarterfinals. I'm hoping against hope that this might be the nonfiction winner of the whole shebang, but I gotta say I'm not quite optimistic because I'm pretty sure it got into the semifinals only by the skin of its teeth, so we'll have to wait and see. Question 3 is the best sequel you've read so far this year, and I'm fudging the question to talk about a prequel because I have to talk about A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which might in fact be my favorite book of the year. Have you ever really felt like you and an author are on the same wavelength, and that everything she wants to talk about in her book is what you want to read about and what you want to delve into? All of these questions about authoritarianism and issues of social contracts between people, and exploring how societies respond after vicious civil wars, the nature of humanity, and also burgeoning celebrity culture and pop culture and propaganda. I especially felt it with The Mockingjay, and I feel it again too, that I'm just so compelled by what she is saying in these stories, and this is an incredibly worthy backstory to Panem and the Hunger Games, and I did everything I wanted. It was like everything that I was hoping that the Testaments might do and didn't do, but Suzanne Collins, she nailed it. She nailed it. Question number 4 is to talk about your favorite short story collection of the year, and for this I am talking about Carry Her Home by Caroline Bock. As a disclaimer, I actually met this author in person a year ago at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, and actually submitted some of my own writing to a contest that she is editing for. But I was really intrigued by this. This is a different sort of writing style than I think I'm used to. It's more autobiographical and also more indebted to flash fiction. And in a way, maybe that helped me be more compelled by this, because so many of the pieces, you know, relate to one another. And in fact, I don't know if I necessarily like them as much on their own, but I like the whole they create. And question 5 is my most read genre, and again, like every other year, it is fiction. Part of me wondered if the BookTube Prize would push nonfiction over for me, because I've been reading solely nonfiction for the BookTube Prize, but I should have known myself better than that. The way I divide my genres up even on Goodreads is that I'm very particular. I have sections for Jewish fiction and Jewish short stories, along with general fiction and general short stories. So I'm even just talking about fiction alone and not Jewish fiction on top of it. And I have only a couple groups, I guess, for my nonfiction categories. I've split them off into nonfiction, which is kind of up there, and also memoir. And then I have a literary criticism category, which tends to be lower. But anyway, the answer is that I continue to mostly read fiction. Question 6 is to talk about new releases I want to read, and this is where I shame myself, where I talk about books that I own, and I own them because I talked about them on my most anticipated reads list in January, but I still haven't read them yet. Number 1 is Beyond the Shadowed Earth by Joanna Ruth Myer. This is YA fantasy. It's a companion novel to Myers' first novel that came out a couple of years ago. I love this author, and I mean, I actually do sort of know her outside of her books, because I was introduced to her through a NaNoWriMo Vidler community several years ago, and I was really intrigued by her passion for her work, and I followed her career. And this is her 3rd book, and I've really liked her first book. This is a epic fantasy novel. There's a lot of music in here, and that's something that really intrigues me. I'm someone who really wants to get more away from the martial stuff in fantasy, so I especially also want to read this one because it follows the antagonist of the first novel, and I'm somebody who's intrigued by giving dimension to antagonists, so I will be getting to this. The next book I just got is The Poet King by Ilana C. Meyer, which is the 3rd and final book in her Harp and Ring sequence. And I just talked about it a bit in my book haul video that I just did, but it's kind of similar, except that it's adult fantasy, but it's still high fantasy and has a lot of focus on music and culture in that way. So basically, same rules apply. And finally, we have the Toni Morrison Book Club by Juda, Bennett, Winnifred, Brown-Glaude, Cassandra Jackson, and Piper Kendrix Williams. And my excuse for this is that I wanted to wait until the end of the year after I finished my Toni Morrison reading project. I don't really have to, because this memoir, these essays, I don't think are like directly linked to the novel, so it's not like I'll get overly spoiled. I think it's going to be more about their lives and what they learn about themselves, but I still feel like this should be the chaser for after I finish my project, so that's why I haven't read it yet. Question 7 is anticipated releases for the rest of the year, and this is one that kept growing because I had a lot of time to think about this question, and apparently there are still a couple of books that are going to be published in 2020, at least as far as I know right now. The first one would be Ferrante Fever. It's The Lying Life of Adults by Elena Ferrante, her latest novel with what I think must be the best title ever. I love it. And I particularly love Elena Ferrante as well, especially the Neapolitan novels, but I've also been intrigued by the confrontations and what she's been saying about female life in her other books, so I am ready to go with this one. Next, I'm going to turn to historical fiction with Dark Tides by Philippa Gregory. I read the first book in this new series, Tidelands, at the end of last year, and I really enjoyed it. And this one I think is going to jump a bit. Like, you know, Tidelands takes place in a really rural area in 17th century England, and now I think we're jumping into London and even Venice, so it's going to be a very different feel, but I'm still intrigued, and I still kind of want to follow the characters from the first novel, although I do think we're going to be jumping forward significantly in time, and it's going to be more about the family, but I'm going to go with it. And finally, with YA fantasy, I have A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, the long-awaited, in my mind, conclusion to her Ember in the Ashes series. This is the fourth book. Yeah, I'm very excited. I've fallen hard for the characters. I think a lot of the themes are compelling. I really hope she sticks the landing. I have a lot of faith that she will. Kind of in line with that is the question of my biggest disappointment of the year, which is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is the finale of her YA fantasy series, the Folk and Air series. And I just feel like she dropped the ball a bit. It felt very rushed, and in fact it was published the same year as the second book. And I just don't think she did enough justice to the characters and to, you know, the world that she built up. That being said, this whole series was more of a melodrama. I think there's more meat to, you know, what I just talked about with Sabaa Tahir, and this one really was more pure escapism. And the other book I want to talk about is Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner, which I just talked about and read very recently for a book club that I started, or my mother started, or we might be doing. Anyway, I had a feeling that you know, my mom and my aunt and other women I've known all my life might be able to shine more light on this book and give it more grace than I did. I mean, they didn't get so caught up in the pacing issues or whatever, and they were able to think and talk a lot more about the issues of what it's like to be the indebted couple, and because there's class differences in this book. And my aunt talked a lot about Charity's family, because they're this like little clan, and they're just kind of cozy, and they know their history really well, and they have a lot of that behind them. And they talked also a lot about Charity's death wishes, which were very contentious. So they were really able to see the points of this book and like apply them to real life and have sort of more respect for the smaller moments between these characters, which for me, I just felt like overall they weren't enough, and I was the one who got more frustrated by Sally only having polio and that's all there is to her, and that sort of thing. And for biggest surprise, I have two books. The first being The Plot Against America by Philip Roth. This is the audiobook I listened to before the HBO miniseries came out. And I guess I'm saying I'm surprised because I have not liked my experience with Philip Roth. I read two of his earlier novels and very deeply disliked them. I had a feeling, and it bore fruit, that some of his later novels, or at least this novel, would be a little better, and that Roth is sort of able to get out of his own head. I mean, notwithstanding that all the main characters are his immediate family that are named their exact same names, but he was able to get out of his head a bit more and talk about more compelling issues of, namely of anti-Semitism and xenophobia and demagogues in the American presidency and all of that. So I really did like it more than I ever thought I could like a Philip Roth book, I guess. I mean, then the next book I want to talk about is Charged, the new movement to transform American prosecution and end mass incarceration by Emily Bazelon. This was another one I read for the BookTube Prize, which I didn't even know about until it was on my to-read list. And what surprises me is just how much I've been thinking about it and how much I've been talking about it with my family and friends on social media and in person, and that it just really opened my eyes, I think, in a fresh way to issues of the U.S. criminal justice system and how it works, and how it really works against a lot of people, in fact. And I'm just really grateful to have read this and to have expanded my knowledge of this situation, especially since, you know, as a voter, this is something that we can dip into. My newest favorite author is a bit of a cheat because, well, she's not a debut author in any sense of the word, and she's not technically new to me because I read one of her books in college. But in fact, I was so filled with a little regret about the experience because I was so focused on, you know, papers and grades and stuff that I didn't think I got the meat of the novel into my head. So I feel like she's new to me, and I can even say that I've read more of her novels. In fact, so far I've read 6 of her novels in 2020, and that would be Toni Morrison. I decided on my own that I wanted to read all of her novels after hearing of her passing, and then Hannah from Hannah's Books so graciously reached out to me because she had the same idea, and she created a Voxer group where we could talk about her novels called Toni Morrison 2020. So it's been a wonderful experience also to, you know, connect me to more of BookTube, but it's been wonderful as well because Toni Morrison is a really powerful writer. I think it's grown stronger. I mean, for me personally, I think I'm enjoying her later books a little more than her first couple, and that I'm appreciating more how she's getting her themes across of the everyday injustices and sadnesses and joys of the Black community, particularly in 20th century America, that she talks about through parables and folklore and stream of consciousness, and her writing is so beautiful. The next question is to talk about my newest fictional crush. And I promised Steve I wouldn't do this. But I'm gonna answer the question anyway and say Lucy Gray from The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I'm just saying, Lucy Gray is someone who is absolutely committed to her own lifestyle, no matter what anyone else thinks of her. She's a bit of a pariah, but she knows who she is, and she knows who her community is. And she's also a writer and a songwriter, and she lives her emotion freely and fully, perhaps not always wisely. And I'm not saying I want to date a YA fictional character, I'm just saying she has attractive traits. But actually, I am going to twist this question as well, as I've done the last 2 years. This is my one original question in this tag, and anybody who wants to can use it because I love this question. It's to talk about your favorite fictional relationship that you've read about this year. And I love relationships in fiction. And for this one, I'm going for another one in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the one between future President Snow, aka Croyo, and Sejanus. I think this one is the most genuine relationship that could have challenged Croyo to grow beyond his need for control and his fear of being without it. Because Sejanus is someone who was basically accepted into capital society. His father was a war profiteer, and he grew up for a few years in the districts, in District 2, but then he moved to the capital and ostensibly became one of them, even though he never fully felt that way. And Croyo goes back and forth with what he thinks of this guy. I mean, he thinks he's kind of too idealistic, but throughout the course of the novel, you can see that he does have some affection for this kid Sejanus, who you know, sticks his neck out on the line a lot for Croyo in a more genuine way than he's often used to outside of his own family. And that Croyo's humanism is most challenged, I think, by Sejanus and by their friendship. And I won't say anything about how they end up, because it's one of the few, I guess, actual spoilers from a prequel, but it moved me. A less contentious question for many is your newest favorite character of the year. And I wanted to throw a bone again to nonfiction with Albert Woodfox from Solitary. This is his memoir, and I was just really impressed by him, and I think there's a lot in his personality that is alien to me, which speaks a lot to my own life being so different from his. He has, in this book, you can just feel it, like the internal stuff. I mean, that he has this internal strength and this internal no-nonsense regimen that he gives himself, that he has to, because that's the only way that he can face and overcome his external realities of all of the injustice being done to him. This is a memoir about his experience in solitary confinement in the U.S. prison system after he was accused of a murder he did not commit. But I do feel like I should also mention a couple of fictional characters, and I'm going to stick with Toni Morrison for this. The two that pop out to me the most. Number one would be Denver from Beloved. And I'm particularly going with Denver because her mother and the phantom that might be her sister, they're the ones who sort of get locked into a metaphysical struggle. But Denver throughout the whole story is, I guess, the most human character. And when you want to look at how a human girl, the direct descendant of slavery, is able to take all of this pain and trauma and move forward in the human physical world, Denver is the one who encapsulates all of that. And the other character I want to talk about from Toni Morrison is Undine from Tar Baby. I was surprised how much I was taken in by this character. She's sort of a secondary character. She's the aunt of the main character who's sort of stuck between a white world that she is benefiting from. She's the ward of white people. And Undine is a maid to this white couple who is patronizing her daughter, her niece. But just the way that she's trying to hold her family together and stay true to her roots and how she challenges her niece, I was just really moved by that, and I thought she was such a strong character. You might see that the angle and the lighting have changed a bit because I guess this is a long video. I ran out of battery and had to recharge. But continuing on with the tag. The book that made me cry is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. Particularly one of her composite patients who was in this horrible rut, very much of her own doing, in that she had a past where she inadvertently hurt her children, and they had all this bad blood between them, and she was filled with all of this self-hate and regret that she wasn't able to make new connections in her life even when possibilities arose. And it was just so sad and demoralizing how much this stuff can get into your skin and keep you from having any sort of meaningful life, or let alone like any sort of forgiveness with family. And because obviously you can't control a lot of that anyway, but that was the storyline in particular that really got to me. And for the book that made you happy, I'm going to say Educated by Tara Westover. That what she says is education isn't about learning a trade and you know, getting it for a career, but really learning critical thinking skills in a way to expand your knowledge of the world around you, of our history and our culture, and also, most importantly, to understand yourself and understand ways to, like, interrogate different truths to see which one is the one that feels the most right for you. And that's something for Westover that was particularly important because her parents had a very strict and fundamentalist view of the world and about right and wrong, and within it she couldn't challenge anything, and her education was about her really not only learning the world but learning herself. So I thought that was very moving, and it made me happy that she was able to do that. But I gotta say that this year my sad book and my happy book are basically the same, in that there's like a tilt-a-whirl between the both of them, because in the Gottlieb book I was so happy about how a lot of these characters, patients, were able to come to some sort of equilibrium and make positive changes in their lives, and it was so moving in that way. And also for Educated, it could make me really sad, not only the physical abuse, which was awful, but particularly the gaslighting and the emotional abuse. That a major storyline is that her brother had been physically abusing her for years, and he and her parents basically turned it around on her, and they'd either say it was her fault and made her believe it, or they'd deny it ever happened. And that sort of mental abuse is absolutely harrowing, and that could certainly be a tearjerker as well. Next I have my favorite review / booktube video, and for this one I'm going to go with my MaybeMidrash reading wrap-up. The MaybeMidrash readathon was started by a couple of booktubers. It was a readathon we did last month where we picked books of fiction or nonfiction that dealt with world religion in some way, and I picked a couple of books about Judaism, and then I really tried to go into some of the themes and the quotes to fashion a review video, and I'm really proud of how that one turned out, so I'll link it down below. The best book to film adaptation I've seen this year, or technically, I guess, book to HBO, is My Brilliant Friend Season 2. I'm just reprising what I said last year with Season 1. I loved Season 2, and I wrote a review of it on one of my blogs, which I'll link down below. I'm also really proud of that review and the things I was able to pluck out of the season. Although I gotta say, if you check out that review, I have a less friendly review of Westworld in that post, so I have unpopular opinions. For the most beautiful book cover I bought or received this year, I try to imagine a graphic design room in a major publishing house where someone high up comes in and says, okay, we gotta find a way to get the 30-something white women into the store, so give me your pastel backgrounds and your scrawling scripts ASAP, and I am here for it. This is A Pure Heart by Rajia Hassib, and there's just something about all of this that makes me love this cover, and it just screams internal drama female story to me. I'm really looking forward to this. I was going to read this in July, but I might put it off another month because looks like my book club with my mom it all went well, and we chose another book to read for next month, so. But this will be coming. My next big priority in my reading, well, about a month ago I actually did an author's answer video which asked me about my summer reading, so I talk about a lot of that there. I will link the video down below. The short version is more short stories, more Toni Morrison, and this book for Women in Translation Month. Also in late summer / early fall, I will be returning to the BookTube Prize, I'm pretty sure, I hope, to do a finals round. Not sure how it's all going to work out, if I'll be reading fiction or nonfiction, but I'm really excited for it. Speaking of which, my biggest bookish highlight of the year has to be officially joining the BookTube Prize. The truth is, I signed up for fiction and nonfiction hoping maybe I'd get half and half, but getting nonfiction for both the octafinals and the quarterfinals really opened my eyes to books I might not have been able to read or might not have gotten to anyway, and they've been an incredible variety and so informative and interesting, and I've absolutely loved talking about them on YouTube and watching other BookTube Prize videos to see what everyone thinks of all of the books. It's just been a really incredible experience, I think, to be part of this, and probably something that really helped keep me grounded when I went into quarantine and when I went into furlough for work, that I had this project to do. I'm really grateful for that as well. And the final question is, what books do I have to read by the end of the year? And there's always so many different answers for this, and I feel differently about it every year as well. But this year, I feel like I have to shame myself one more time with this book. This is PIRKEI IMAHOT, The Wisdoms of the Mother, The Voices of Women. PIRKEI IMAHOT is a play on Pirkei Avot, which is a seminal work of Jewish religious literature. PIRKEI IMAHOT is taking some of the teachings of Pirkei Avot and also contemporary teachings from today, and this woman, Louise Sussman Schechner, and her Rabbi Eve Posen, they sat down and they thought through these questions spiritually themselves. And it's also a workbook where I can go and read it and give my thoughts, which is why I didn't end up getting to this book last year when I hoped to. I had it on Goodreads for months, and the fact that I had to write things out for it kept me putting it off and off and off, even though I wanted to read it for High Holidays last year, and I don't want to have it on my TBR by next High Holidays. So that means I have to read it now and fill it out now. I mean, come on, self, it's a quarantine. Shame. So I'm thinking, this is on my TBR for July, and it's not going anywhere until it's done. So that about covers it for me now. If you have stuck with me throughout this whole thing, I really hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed making it, and as much as I've enjoyed watching all of the mid-year BookTube videos, book tag videos out there. Woo! I think I need a break for now, though. But check back soon, because because tomorrow I hope to have out my quarterly writing wrap-up for the spring to see how well I did with my writing goals and set some new ones, so stay tuned. In the meantime, I hope your first half of 2020 reading hasn't been as invigorating as I found mine to be. I've really enjoyed talking about all of these books. And I have high hopes for what's coming in the next half. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.